Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Superman and Lois. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Immediately picking up after last week's episode, we have Clark taking Jordan to the Fortress of Solitude, where Jor-El is telling him that basically what's happening to Jordan is something that, much like Clark, he's going to have to figure it out. Like, it has to be through training, learning how to control his hearing, because obviously he's hearing everything, which has got to be the most excruciating thing, because obviously it's like not just nearby distance. It's not like, oh, everything nearby is enhanced. It's like everything. His hearing is stretching and hearing everything. So they end up giving him I'm assuming like heavily modified silencing headphones that just kind of muffle everything, which I wonder how do you even go about making some headphones like that? I mean, I would assume like any soundproof headphones wouldn't be enough with his super hearing, but maybe. But I think they probably had to get like a specifically modified version. But obviously they're going to have Jordan stay home until Clark can help him train through his powers. He is helping him little by little, but it's still too much, because every time it's not just like, oh, he's hearing everything. It's also like rattling him, because it's like so much. He's in so much pain, and Clark went through this himself. He's like, I was kind of knocked out for weeks because of this. So there's no telling. And then maybe the fact is that it took, it seems like Jordan's got it more under control throughout the episode. I know I'm skipping around a little bit, but that might be kind of an aspect to this too, that he might be coming to terms to his powers even quicker than Clark. He might be able to kind of ascend to maybe like the heights that Clark is at. Like maybe Jordan can reach there in a short amount of time. Maybe not. We'll see. But obviously, since we're under Jordan front, let's kind of stay there for a little bit. And obviously, it's the complicated thing of, trying to focus all his powers, but it doesn't work until, he gives himself something to focus on, that being Sarah. And in that moment, obviously, he's overhearing everything between her and Jonathan, which kind of upsets him, because it's like he likes Sarah, but obviously they're just friends, but obviously he wants there to be more. But obviously, with everything she's kind of going through right now, she needs more friend more than she does a boyfriend. But Jonathan isn't like into her, at least it doesn't necessarily seem like it's just because she is like the only friend he has, because he's not tight with anyone else at school. I mean, to be fair, she's the only person Jordan's friends with as well. So, but it is a situation that's what pissed him off. That it's like, well, you're getting up in my grill later on about asking me. It's like, for one, you're spying on me. Two, you're asking me. He's like, for him, it's like, I've had your back. No matter everyone saying this, saying that about you, it's not true, and I've always had your back. But you're a terrible person, because you don't ever spy on me again. Which is interesting, because let's not forget, Lois brought that conversation up early in the show. Early in the season, bringing up the fact that she kind of almost broke up with Clark at one point in time in their relationship, because she found out he was listening into her. That was just so he could always make sure she was okay, but it was like he crossed some boundaries. So it's kind of interesting to kind of see that kind of reflected amongst Jordan and Jonathan as well. But it definitely, obviously Jordan meets that girl in the episode, which Sarah was like, no, she's out of your league. It's like, how do you know who's out of the league? It was like, well, it's pretty apparent it's her. But it's just them kind of talking. Obviously, he's trying to alleviate some of, the questions she has about Tag and everything. It's like, so he has to lie, but he skews a little closer to the truth. He's like, right. So it was actually, Jordan's kind of rattled because Tag's the one that attacked him. And it's like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, now he's got these terrible headaches. And why didn't he say anything? It's like, yeah, Jordan probably just didn't want to worry you. So, and obviously it's a whole thing about, secrets and kind of how heavy it is. It is kind of sucky because that's the thing, it is a heavy aspect of their life. Right, there's a part of our lives we can never tell anyone. Our dad is Superman, and we always have to be careful that we don't slip up and tell anyone, reveal that, because it put their family in danger. That's the whole point of a secret identity and everything. So it's hard enough doing it as adults. I can't imagine doing that as two teenagers. I mean, well, to be fair, Clark had to do it. It's one thing when it's your own secret to keep. It's hard enough when it's someone else's secret. They have to keep their father's secret, So that's a hard enough thing in its own. Especially because with everything going on, it just feels very they're kind of ostracized to a certain extent. Yeah, they're tight. Well, because I had to take that back, because Jordan actually has everyone on a football team. But Jonathan doesn't really. I mean, he's okay with them, but he's not as tight with them as Jordan kind of is. So it is a situation where it's he doesn't, he's kind of, whereas Jordan was the outsider at one point in time, he is now. So it's just interesting, how those roles have continued to kind of become reversed. So obviously there's that side of things. Obviously, Lois is looking more into Marcus, finding out that, hey, Marcus isn't the real Marcus because the real Marcus died some years ago. So I don't know who this dude is, but obviously Lois wants to kind of meet with him just to kind of confront him, and she needs Clark nearby. So she goes to him and it's like, I know you're not Marcus, so at the end of the day, I'm going to we're going to meet in an hour and you're going to just tell me everything. And then we get a flashback. We already knew about him and Lois, but now we interestingly enough find out they have a kid together. It's like, so that's why this hits even harder, because it isn't just like, Lois isn't just your wife. She's the mother of your daughter. It's like, whoa, that's got to be rough. Not only seeing that, like, oh, she's got someone else, probably seeing that she's got kids with someone else. It just adds more and more just how the dagger sticks in a little deeper, especially when we learn what happened to her. Obviously, like, and that was like a very Man of Steel scene, obviously, like, with just the mass level of destruction is what I'm meaning, but just like, Superman floating up, and it's not him alone, like all the other like super beings as well, like other Supermen, Superwomen, or whatever are like. Because I was like, oh, those other Kryptonians, but it seems like that's related to this whole ex-Kryptonite situation, and they start burning buildings to the ground, and it seemed like they stayed in like an underground shelter, bunker or whatever, like quote unquote Luthor, Captain Luthor. And his daughter, and Lois is on the news saying like, you need to find kryptonite. It's the only thing that can hurt these Kryptonians. And she says like, I love you both, just as Kal-El in particular. So it's no wonder you have an issue with not just what they did as a whole, like all these super beings, what they did. Kal-El in particular, he killed your wife on television too. That's brutal. That, like, understandably so. I mean, to be fair, it's like we know Lois is. I mean, that also explains like why he was so tight with Sam. Lois is dad. It makes sense. That's your father-in-law as well. So it adds a lot of context and developments about it's a situation where you can. It was always a situation of you can understand why he's doing what he's doing, because of the world he came from was conquered by people like Superman and Superman himself, Kal-El. So it's like. It's understandable. It makes you wonder what happened in that world. I would assume, because it's like, oh, Superman. It seems like Superman just went bad in one day. So I'm assuming like Morgan Edge just, I mean, obviously he made all those people. Maybe he found a way to control Superman. I don't know. Or maybe it's a situation where like something happened and just Superman himself, like Clark just snapped. I mean, to be fair, also, we don't know what Clark's life is like on that world. Like, he's just Kal-El. We don't know if he's even Clark Kent on that world. He might not be. Maybe in this world he was always Kal-El, or has been. Like, who knows? It's not. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but it could be like a Red Sun situation. Obviously, like him landing, like the Red Sun storyline. If you're unaware, is what if Clark, instead of landing in Kansas, landed in Russia? So, specifically like Soviet Russia, I believe. I don't know if the time frame. What the time frame of that is, like whether that comic is set like modern day or whether it's a little further in the past, whatever the case may be, like how that changes his story, and whether that how different he is and how similar he is in certain regards. So that's why I'm wondering, like in this world, like what happened, like who was he before? Was he always just Kal-El, or was he someone else? Or was he Clark Kent? So many questions in that regard. But so. Obviously, Lois sets up her meeting to talk to him, and obviously at the same time, Clark is investigating and hears the little orb say, Captain Luthor. In that moment, obviously, all you had to hear was that Luthor name. Oh, that's always going to get Clark's attention. It's like, wait, what? So, obviously, he's not telling Lois everything, but he's saying that basically Morgan Edge is going to take over the world. It's like, he's going to start with Metropolis. And it's like, you sound so sure of yourself. And he's like, I am. Obviously, because he doesn't want to tell her everything. Because he's like, if I do, it's going to be extremely complicated. I can't, because obviously considering his story, it's like, right, you're not going to believe me. But it's like, sadly, Lois out of anyone will believe you. But obviously Chrissy calls about, like, obviously hearing about a shipment. Because we find out Leslie came up with the idea to kind of draw out. Because it's like, right, they've got Marcus, because there's no fingerprints for him, so they have no idea who he is. Superman and Lois investigating this, so they need to find out more about what's going on, who's their real enemy. So they set it up so that a small shipment is being sent out, and in the process, they're figuring that whoever comes in to claim it, that'll kind of let them know like what's what. So this whole thing was a trap. Obviously, Clark gets in with Lois, and obviously they're having a conversation about, okay, so he's a Luthor. Do you think he's related to Lex? It's like, I don't know. It's also like, well, we know like the multiverse and everything, so like there's a long list of possibilities. But for them, they start thinking like, could it be like, could he be like a distant cousin? Could he be related to Lex in some shape or form? Because I think at the very least, maybe what they were going for, like, yeah, he's talked about like being from a different world, but what they're probably extrapolating is, well, there are doppelgangers on a lot of planets, so they're probably thinking like, if we find out like he's related to, like if he's related to Lex, that means we can run through Lex's like family situation. Maybe he has an illegitimate child or something. Like maybe there's something on that of that lane and nature of like, okay, like we can find like more out about him by looking for him on this Earth as this Earth's his counterpart from this Earth. So, but obviously, the confrontation was really interesting when obviously he manages to pick up the kryptonite, and obviously he's having that flashback about Superman killing his wife for killing his Lois, and it's a situation of like, obviously, like, who do we trust? He's saying like, you can trust me in this situation, but also it's like, I need you to bring Superman into it because this is how we kind of stop everything. And it's like, do you trust him? And she's like, with my life. And he's like, I figured you'd say that. And I liked how they did that scene though, like hard cut it between her saying I trust him with my life and Superman from that other world killing Lois. So that's interesting. Which is also interesting too, considering like Lois's death is what sends Superman spiraling in certain storylines. So it's just interesting for him to be responsible for her death. I mean, like, once again, wasn't that what starts everything in Injustice? That it was actually the Joker that killed her, if I remember correctly? I mean, they were setting it up in, like, Zack Snyder's Justice League as well. Like, once again, I think the skeleton he was holding was Lois's. So, but, so, nevertheless, our Captain Luthor is preparing all this machinery. We cut back and forth between present day, him working on stuff, but also him working on stuff with his daughter. And it's like, I guess she was kind of like a little bit of a mechanical genius. And skipping it around a little bit, I think it is really interesting when we do find out his identity, because that actually shocked me, because they ended, like, obviously they sent the case to and I thought that was pretty brilliant. It's like, oh, we're getting the case. I was like, okay, like, where are you going to get the kryptonite examined? Just like, no, we're going to get his prints ran. And it's like, Clark's like, oh, that's pretty, he didn't think about it. Even I was like, oh, that's interesting, because they have a larger database, so they'll be able to kind of run his prints and stuff like that. So ultimately, they were able to kind of figure out who he was. But, it is kind of that sweet, kind of adorable thing of like them being like working together and stuff like that. It's like, oh, like, just another day at the office, right, honey? Type of thing of like, almost like this is the most normal thing ever. But to be fair, they've been doing this for a while. Different circumstances, kind of the same old, day in, day out kind of work, So I think that's kind of fascinating aspect of, their relationship. But, obviously, we find out his name is John Henry Irons, and that I was like, oh, that's it, because like obviously there is this Earth's counterpart of it, but he died 6 years ago. And I'm like, oh, that's so fascinating. And we kind of find out why. I was like, oh, is he actually like because we know like different people can be, because like obviously you look at Barry's dad. Barry's God, what is his dad's name? His dad's name is Henry, right? But on Earth 3, his doppelganger was Jay Garrick. So that's why I was wondering, like, oh, is that like this Earth's version of him, but on a different Earth he's a Luthor? That's what I was wondering. But interestingly enough, like, I thought so. I kept being like, that armor looked like it's Lex's, but I figured because he's a Luthor, maybe that's why. It's like, no, that is Lex's armor. They just reprogrammed the AI to operate with him by making it think he's Lex. So it's like, okay, so that's why I kept calling him Captain Luthor, because he's not a Luthor at all. Which I think makes it even that much more interesting, because that just proves like, oh, he's not a Luthor, and that this is kind of like some family legacy thing of like, right, it's always going to come down to this, like, like I said, a Kryptonian versus a Luthor. He's a regular dude. And I think that makes it even more interesting. It's kind of like that it's well, at least where we were introduced with Zemo in the MCU, it's like, oh, he was a regular dude wanting revenge that took down the Avengers. Well, to be fair, we end up finding out later on, oh, he's called Baron Zemo because he's actually a Baron. So it kind of changes that up a little bit, but it's still the thing of like almost like a regular bloke. And I think that makes this whole thing interesting too, because it's like, right, him and his daughter worked on it. So like, and once again, if you took the lens of this show from a different perspective, if it wasn't like, oh, we know Superman, the fact is that oh, we're fighting to save the world, take down Kal-El, he needs to be stopped. It's like, that could be like, oh, he could definitely be the hero. Once again, it's just the lens that you view the show. He's an antagonist, but it's also the thing of, right, he's coming from a place of, he's trying to save this world from suffering the same fate his did. But the thing is, he's just lumping this world's Superman into with his, because for him, it's like, ultimately, he draws Clark in after he sets everything up. For one, he's got the red solar red sun energy to like basically drain him of his powers, and also has like, he goes full-blown Thor and like summons this giant hammer that basically builds up kinetic energy, and it's like the further it gets thrown, the more powerful it is, and it's like, holy crap, dude. But for him to bring up, it's like your whole like being a hero thing is just a facade. So I'm like, right. So that does solidify like he was a hero first in that world before he became its largest threat. Once again, how that came to be, we don't know. But for him, it's like saving the world is by me ending you. Morgan Edge is involved, but you are the destruction of the world. And I love him being like, you think you're the Man of Steel, but you think it's you, but I'm the Man of Steel. So I thought that was an interesting development. Luckily, Jordan's powers allowed him to kind of hear their dad being in trouble, so Jonathan drives him there, and Jordan wanted to make sure the dad's okay, focuses on it, so everyone's kind of rushing there all at once. Lois getting the information about John, and clicks because she figured out, it's like, he's most likely a stranger and everything, so she's clicking, especially knowing like, oh, he's dead in this world. So but obviously Clark's hands are full, but luckily Jordan and them showed up. But then like Jordan's kind of disoriented. At first I was like, oh, is it just because your power? I'm like, oh, right. The sun, that's probably messing with you too. Because that's a part of the conversation we haven't had yet. Because we know Kryptonians get their superpowers from the sun. That's a conversation Clark hasn't had with like Jordan or Jonathan yet. I'm curious, like, I would assume the Kryptonian side of him would be that as well. So there is a means of mitigating that, like, because it gets you wondering too. It's like, well, because he's half Kryptonian, what would kryptonite do to him? Would it still affect him the same way? What about other forms of kryptonite? Because it seemed like the red sun in that moment was draining him, like it did Clark. But luckily, Jonathan was able to smash the lights. So, and once again, that aspect of Clark kind of losing control, being so agitated, because it's like, the fact of the matter is, like, he brought it up last episode about being tested, and just like, everyone, those fears that people have, is like, that I have to show them that I won't use my powers. And in that moment, Clark's walking up, eyes glowing, and for John, he keeps flipping back and forth between this world and his world, where it's like with Superman standing before him, and Clark grabs him and is about to punch him, but Lois is like, stop, it's over, and he legitimately stops. And it's like, if it would, like, Lois helps kind of bridge that, because it's interesting, because Lois in that other world talked about that's what separates us from them, our humanity, that makes us better than them. And it's like, John doesn't know in this world Clark isn't just some super being. He has not just someone, he has multiple people to bridge that, humanity for him. His mom and dad might be gone, but he has Lois, and he has the boys to always ground his humanity and bring him back. Lois will always bring him back to being just like, right, you are Clark Kent. She always tugs at the human part of him, because he isn't just some superpowered alien, So I just thought that was kind of interesting, and I was wondering if that would change John's perspective on things. I don't think it's really clicked in his mind of like, oh, like Lois and the kids and everything, them being there to save Superman. Like, I don't know if it's good, especially because I should have talked about it earlier, but I love that line of like, oh, the computer was like, oh, we had an intruder. It's like, who is? That's just Lois's husband. He's not important. I'm like, ha ha ha. You have no idea the irony behind it, because once again, because like Lex made that same point when he being like, oh, Superman, there's no way Clark Kent is Superman. Yeah, you might have been Superman. Clark Kent might be Superman on a different Earth, but there's no way the Clark Kent from my world is Superman. So it's that type of thing. So, obviously, another angle to this episode too is the whole situation with Lana, trying to do whatever she can to help Lois, because for her, she doesn't know what she's necessarily looking for, but she goes into work. And so Morgan wants her to kind of recruit people for a program, which we later on find out that program is test subjects. Leslie is currently the only one that hasn't suffered any ramification from the experiments. The only one that hasn't seemed to like degrade over time. So trying to find other suitable hosts. And, one of the people that comes in for the job is Emily, someone that Lana knows, another mother that's kind of struggling, and Lana's like kind of saying like, yeah, you don't know all there is to the job. She can't say too much, but this is someone she knows that she doesn't. It's like, at the very least, I don't want to mix you up in this, especially later on. Morgan was like, hey, Kyle could become a part of it. She's like, what? No, he's a fireman plus our daughters. So it's like, I'm not about to put my husband in a situation where he might become an experiment and have powers and stuff happen. It's like, no. But sadly, we end up finding out Morgan kind of went behind. I wonder, did he do that because it's like, right, we can use Lana's connection, and it's like, oh, Lana's probably going to be so happy to have a friend of hers on the job. I don't know why he did that. Maybe he felt like it'd be easier because, I mean, to be fair, Emily wanted the job. She needed the job for her family's sake. But also, I don't know. It was just an interesting, but I guess it's like they needed another candidate, and she was so willing for the job, and it's like, oh, like even going through the trouble of being like, oh yeah, like don't worry, Lana put in a good word for you and stuff like that. So I'm like, it makes you wonder, is he suspicious of her, like her reluctancy to kind of pull the trigger on some of that? I mean, she went ahead and got like 4 other subjects, but it still needed one more. And her reluctancy to pull the trigger when it came to Kyle, or I don't know, maybe he accepted her excuses. Maybe he's not suspecting anything. Who knows? They were able because of John and Superman's battle. Leslie was able to kind of slip more ex-Kryptonite shipments in to kind of do what they need to. So building this so-called army. For what purposes, I don't know. Maybe like Morgan's planning on making super beings so he can sell them to the highest bidder, typical rich megalomaniac type of thing. Maybe, maybe not. So there's that angle to it. We'll have to wait and see. But another aspect is the conversation at the very end, obviously Lois blaming herself, being like, I'm supposed to be the top reporter. Like, how could I not see him for who he really is? And you almost died in the process. It's like, it's okay. I got lucky, because of Jordan's powers kicking in, honing in everything. But for Lois, it's like, we can't just go by luck, because obviously they don't know. They feel, because Lois is like, there's definitely something else he's hiding. And it's like, Clark is like, yeah, you're right. But they're going to wait for Lois's dad to come back, which is interesting because obviously Sam and John had an interaction earlier in the season, him warning about Clark. So I'm curious to see what that means when they do finally like interrogate him soon enough, like how that conversation is going to go, because obviously John's going to talk to Sam about like probably like, I know you because from my world you were a good man. You saw him for what he really is. Considering like Sam is one of those people, I'm sure even in this continuity, who was reluctant of Superman, but then it's like, right, probably finding out about Clark and everything. But also, he's still probably always a little wary, but that's why he always wants to kind of keep Clark on a short leash of like, right, what you do for the world because you're so good, but also we need to keep an eye on you because you could turn on us at any moment in time. I think there's a little bit of that, like, with Sam, I think it's a little bit of love and it's a little bit of fear mixed in on why he does what he does. When it comes to how he feels about Superman. So I don't know. that conversation is definitely going to be interesting. But another angle to this is like early in the episode, Clark was suggesting they tell the boys everything, but Lois didn't want to worry them because they still weren't aware of the stranger and, you know, all that's going on. But it's like, they don't know about the X-Kryptonite and everything, which obviously is tied to potentially how Tag ended up getting powers in the first place. But it's like, we can't tell them anything because, like, considering everything they've gone through, Jordan, like, struggling with his powers right now, like, they've already got enough on their shoulders. We need to kind of get more information. But now for Lois, it's like, we can't wait any longer. Like, we kind of got to be prepared if anything comes our way again, so the boys have to know. So despite the recklessness of what they did, it's like, right, we're going to tell you everything. And it's like, really? And it's like, yes. And you can't tell anyone because this is classified information. I should also focus on that whole conversation between Jonathan and Jordan about, you know, once again, I brought it up earlier, the whole aspect of almost telling Sarah the truth. But for him, it's like, at least when they kind of straight up lie, for him, it's like, okay, it's kind of unintentional. But the fact is, I'm telling you the truth, but not telling you everything makes the lies feel more intentional. It makes it feel like it cuts a little deeper, at least for him. So, and obviously, Jordan's kind of apologetic that, like, oh, like, Jonathan, I'm sorry, like, you have to lie so much for me, keeping my secrets and everything. But for Jonathan, it's like, because Jordan's like, I just wanted, want things to kind of go back to just being normal. But, you know, for Jonathan, it's like, normal people hide stuff too, so it's not like we're that far off. Like, every family's kind of got their own secrets and stuff. So, but obviously celebrating the fact is, yeah, but I was driving, I know you hit it with the car, oh, that was so dope, I know, don't even have a permit, I don't even know how to drive. So obviously they're going to get filled in about everything. But at the very end, we spend some time with John learning, like, he left his daughter behind for this mission. I'm assuming the ship he took here, because I kept being like, how'd you travel to another world? Because once again, they never make it clear. Like, they make it seem like Earth Prime is the only Earth left. On most of the shows after Crisis on Infinite Earths, even though it ended with the multiverse spreading out. And obviously we have Stargirl and all the other, like, Doom Patrol and Titans all taking place on different Earths and stuff like that. So we know, but I think it's more so like, I'm assuming this exists in a continuity where things already split back out. Like, because the other show, some of the shows haven't really caught up to that time frame wise to be like, yeah, this is where, yeah, the multiverse has built back out, you know, because I feel like if any show's going to touch on it, it would be The Flash, and they've yet to touch on that. So it still never got to that point yet, but I think it has, and at least whatever time frame this show is taking place in, I think it's already kind of spread out. So because I was like, did you like hop onto this Earth right before your world disappeared type of situation? But it's like, no, it's most likely like his Earth is still there, because he from some planet in the multiverse. So like, let's say he's from Earth, I don't know, 99 or whatever. So his Earth is still there, but he got teleported to this Earth. Well, because he did say he was going to kill Kal-El, so like, maybe, well, because he said my world was destroyed, so I guess the whole point was like he was going on a ship and he was going to kill Clark because he had pinpointed his location, but it didn't work out the way he wanted it to, and so somehow he got, like, maybe the ship he's on or whatever teleported him to a different world. I don't know, because I was about to say, like, how do you, like, the only way I know about crossing, well, there's there's technology that allows for that. Obviously, if you're Vibe or you're a speedster, you can make that happen, but still. So I was curious in that, on that front, but like I said, I was thinking like he ended up leaving his daughter behind, being like, oh, I'm gonna be back in a minute, but it's like, whatever happened, his daughter didn't survive that. So he didn't just lose his wife, he most likely lost his daughter too. So, because that's why he's holding on to that hairband, and it's like, I'm going to be back in a minute. Because that's what I was about to say, like, why leave your Earth at all? It's like, because I was confused in that, making it seem like, oh, in that moment after he left his daughter, he went to a different Earth. It's like, why go to a different Earth to kill? It's like, no, you went off trying to kill your Superman on your Earth, and somehow your world either got completely destroyed, like literally got destroyed, there's just nothing left, and you just happen to get off the planet, that Earth, just in time, or at the very least, it's so conquered that there's nothing left for you because Lois is gone, and your daughter's gone, but you're planning to save another world where you know Lois is alive, or at the very least save some other world from the same fate as yours. But whatever the case may be, it's going to be interesting to see where all of this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.